Okay, class, picking up where we left off, we had -6 and -6. We know we add those two together, and that would give us our -12. So we would substitute that. We would have 9x squared minus 6x minus 6x plus 4 equals 0. We group the first two terms. We can factor out a 3x, and we'll be left with 3x minus 2. We group the second two terms, and we can factor out a -2, and we add 3x minus 2, and that equals 0. So we will have 3x minus 2 and also 3x minus 2, and it equals 0. Now if you notice, both of these parentheses are the same, so that means we only have to set one of these parentheses equal to 0 because we're going to get the same answer. So we have 3x minus 2 equals 0, and we add 2 to both sides. We have 3x is equal to 2. Divide each side by 3, and x is 2/3. And that is our final answer. Okay, now we scroll down here to G. Now we have x times 4x minus 11 equals 3. Now the first thing we need to do, of course, we need to get this equation to equal 0. So what we need to do is first, let's subtract 3 on both sides. So now we will have x times 4x minus 11 minus 3 equals 0. So this will give us 4x squared minus 11x minus 3 equals 0. Now, there's nothing in common between these three terms, so we'll do our a, b, and c. A is 4, b is -11, and c is -3. So we'll multiply our a and c, which will give us -12, and we'll take the factors of 12, which is 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Now, since a times c is negative and b is negative, that means that both of these values have to be negative. And we know we want it to equal -11. So what we would have to do, oh, I'm sorry, that was a little mistake there. Because a and c is negative and also b is negative, then what would end up happening is the larger number would be negative. So we'll make all of these larger numbers negative, and we know we'll do 1 and -12, which is -11. So now we substitute this in. We'll have 4x squared plus 1x minus 12x minus 3 equals 0. Now, our first two terms here, we can factor out x, and we have 4x plus 1. Our second two terms here, we can factor out a -3, and we have 4x plus 1. So we will have x minus 3 times 4x plus 1, and they're both set equal to 0. Now, we would set both of these equal to 0, so we have x minus 3 equals 0, and 4x plus 1 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides, and x is equal to 3. Now here we're going to have to subtract 1 on both sides. So we have 4x equals -1. Divide each side by 4. And x is equal to a -1/4. So our final answer here would be, we have x is equal to a -1/4, 3. And that is the final answer to this problem. Now, we need to go back up. And we have to do h now. Now, to do h is already set up, so we could just we cannot factor anything out. So we have a is 1, b is 4, and c is 4. So we multiply our a and c, which gives us 4. And the factors of 4 are 1 and 4, and 2 and 2. And we know since A and C is positive and B is positive, that means that we will leave the signs the same. And 2 plus 2 is 4, so that's what we will use. So we have x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4 equals 0. We group the first two terms. And then we could factor out and we would get x and then x plus 2. We'll group the second two terms here and we could factor out a positive 2 and we will have x plus 2 in parentheses. And that still equals 0. So we have x plus 2 times x plus 2 and that equals 0. Now, since these are the same, we could just set one parenthesis equal to 0. So we have x plus 2 equals 0. We'll subtract 2 on both sides, and x is negative 2. And that's the answer. Now it says here, the graphs of y equals x squared minus 10x plus 28, y equals 7, y equals 3, and y equals 1 are shown below. Use these graphs to solve the given equation. So first of all, the easiest graphs to find is the y equals 7, the y equals 3, and the y equals 1. These straight lines are those graphs. Now, this parabola here is actually this graph here. So watch this. Let's go down here first to A. It says x squared minus 10x plus 28 equals 7. So if you look here, what ends up happening here is this. This 7 represents the y value. And we know this right here represents our x values. So whatever our x values, we'll substitute over here, and that's supposed to give us what our y value is equal to. So this is how we can look at it. So what we would do is we would go to this graph here, and we would say, okay, where does y equal 7 at? So we'll go to 7, and then we'll go here. So when y is 7, that means that x is 3. So we know x equals 3 is an answer. Now we go back to where y is 7, and we go to this other side. When y is 7, x is 7. So our 2 points here will be 3 and also 7. So when we go through and substitute, let's take a look here. 3 squared, we know is 9, minus 10 times 3 is 30, plus 28. Now that's supposed to give us 7. Now minus 30 we know is a negative 21, plus 28 is 7. So we know 3 works. Now we're going to try and use 7. Now if we put in 7, we know 7 squared is 49. And then 7 here, that'll give us minus 70, plus 28 is supposed to be 7. 49 minus 70 is a negative 21, plus 28 is 7. So it works. So this is our answer. X is 3 and y is 7. Now we go here to B. Same thing. We know we're dealing with the parabola, but this lets us know that y is 3. Now when we come here, this is y is 3, right? So now we want to find out what x is equal to. X is equal to 5 when y is 3. So we should just have one answer. So if we substitute in 5, 5 squared, we know is 25. Minus 10 times 5, we know will give us minus 50, plus 28. Now that is supposed to give us 3. So it's plus 28. That's supposed to equal 3. So 25 minus 50, we know is negative 25. Plus 28 equals 3. So 3 is equal to 3. So we know x equals 5 is the solution. Now we go down here, it says x squared minus 10x plus 28 is 1. So we're basically going to go where y is 1, which is here, and we need to find out what our x values are. Now if you notice here that this graph does not hit where Well, y is 1. So our answer here would be just prime. And that is our final answer. Now, class, I made a little error on C. The answer to C should actually be no solution, not prime. You should write down no solution. That is because since this problem is set equal to a value, we'll write down no solution instead of prime. As I said, we will write no solution. So now we scroll down to the next. It says our results from example 3 suggest the following properties. Quadratic equation in one variable has either 2 real number solutions, 1 real number solution, or no real number solutions. It says example 4, the number of football games N that must be played in a league with T teams if each team is to play every other team once is described by N equals T squared minus T over 2. If a league has 45 games scheduled, how many teams belong to the league, assuming that each team plays every other team once? Okay, now it says N is the number of football games, so we know it's 45 is equal to T squared minus T over 2. Now T stands for the teams, so we need to first, let's get rid of this 2 out of the denominator. We'll multiply each side by 2, and we had 90 is equal to T squared minus T, because these 2's will simplify each other out. So now we have to make this equal 0, so we will subtract 90 from both sides, and we have 0 is equal to T squared minus T minus 90. Now, on this side of the equation, they have nothing in common, none of those terms, so we'll go off to the side. We will have A is equal to 1, B is equal to -1, and C is equal to -90. And we know our A times C will give us a -90. Now we need to write out our factors of 90. It's 1 and 90, 2 and 45, I tell you that 4. So it's 2 and 45, 3 and 30. So we have 5 and 18, 6 and 15, and then 9 and 10. Now, since our A and C is negative and our B is negative, that means that all of the larger numbers will be negative. Now on your paper, with all of these larger numbers, put a negative sign in front of them. I didn't leave myself enough space here. But then 9 plus a -10 will give us -1. So we would substitute. We have 0 is equal to T squared plus 9T minus 10T minus 90. Now we group those first 2 terms together. We can factor out a T, and we add T plus 9. We group these second 2 terms together. We can factor out a minus 10, and we have T plus 9. Now, we have 0 is equal to T minus 10 and T plus 9. Now we have to set both of these parentheses equal to 0. I'm going to write it over here. So we had T minus 10 equals 0. So we will add 10 on both sides. So T is equal to 10. And then we will have T plus 9 equals 0. And then we will have T is equal to -9. Now we know that we cannot have a -9 teams. So our answer here would just be T equals 10. So we could cross this out and write down 10 teams. And that's it.